All right, in this short talk, we're going to talk about health, well-being, and health-related quality of life. And we're going to tease out some of the differences and talk a little bit about the similarities. And then as kind of an example, we're going to talk about leisure and how leisure is important for these different concepts, or how leisure is related to health. So my objectives for the talk are first to explain these terms, so talk about health, well-being, and quality of life. And then second, to identify and talk about the ways that leisure can contribute to these different ideas. So we've likely heard all of these terms before, and in some cases we may even use these terms interchangeably. So health, well-being, and health-related quality of life. They are all definitely related and they share some similarities, but they also have some differences that could be teased out and that are really important if we want to be really specific or thoughtful about the way that we use them. So I'm going to go through each of them now, talk a little bit about what the definitions are, and a little bit about how they relate to each other. So first up, we have this idea of health. Now, health is an extremely broad and complex topic that ranges from everything from the kind of positive social experiences that we have to much more complex biophysiological aspects of our bodies as well. So to put a kind of definition on all of it can be kind of difficult. If we look to the World Health Organization, they identify the definition of health as the state of complete physical, social, and mental well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. And that's a really important distinction, this idea of health not only being that we aren't sick or that we aren't living with a certain condition, but that there are positive aspects to health as well, or certain conditions that we look for to describe as healthy. And now this is a good and a really helpful definition, but it isn't a perfect definition. We can always critique and talk about some of the drawbacks of certain definitions. And so Huber and colleagues have done a really great job of laying out how we might critique this definition and how we might think a bit differently about how we can operationalize this idea of health. So notably, by defining it as a complete state, we kind of lose the ability to have some wiggle room in there, right? So one could ask, if someone lives happily with an illness or disability, can that not be described as healthy? Similarly, with changing population demographics and with people living to older ages and living with all kinds of different conditions in all kinds of different circumstances, this definition is very prescriptive about what health looks like and doesn't leave a lot of room for different people to be described as healthy. So that's just kind of one critique, but I'll link that article at the end of the presentation so you can check that out and read through some of the details there. Importantly, this definition does acknowledge that health is a multidimensional concept, meaning that it's not only about the kind of biophysiological aspects of our body, but also includes some of these social and mental aspects of health. So next up, we have wellness. And wellness has gained a lot of really traction in public discourse recently. So we have a huge focus on how we can live well. There's all kinds of organizations and strategies and businesses that are built around what some have called and some have really critiqued as the wellness industry, right? That it has become a way that people are capitalizing on this idea of wellness and trying to make money off of making people feel bad about their bodies and then needing to buy into some of these organizations. But when we go back to the definition, wellness is really related to our subjective experiences of health. And wellness is more kind of keenly focused on the positive aspects of health. So not looking at all these about these ideas of illness or disease and completely focused on this idea of being well and living well. So often wellness is described more as a process rather than a state. So it is a process of living well or a process of being well. And that really changes the focus on the things that we're talking about. Wellness is also a multidimensional concept. So, again, not focused on one sole kind of dimension. So, not only social, not only psychological, not only physical, but kind of incorporating many of those. And some groups go so far as to describe wellness in much broader terms. So, some frameworks will describe a state of environmental wellness. So, or being well in the environments that we're in and with the environments that we're in. And others will describe economic wellness or financial wellness. So being in a circumstance where we're able to comfortably afford to live well in our bodies. So many different kind of conversations that we can bring in under this umbrella. And finally, we have health-related quality of life. And in some ways, this brings in a few different aspects or parts of both of health and wellness. So health-related quality of life is also related to our subjective experiences of health. And so for both of these, when it's about subjective experiences, that means that we can measure it by using self-report strategies. So it can really be about how you feel and how you can tell someone else how you feel, and we can measure it that way. But health-related quality of life goes beyond only looking at the kind of positive reports or the positive aspects of health, and also considers some of the things that may negatively impact our quality of life. So, for example, considering pain, right, and the impact that feeling of pain has on our quality of life. So, health-related quality of life considers some of both the positives as well as some of the negatives and how those relate to our quality of living. So this one is also a multidimensional construct or idea, and this one is typically a little bit more measurable. So if you look at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention website, they have a whole built out series of measurement tools that are used around health-related quality of life. So all of these terms acknowledge the multidimensional nature of health or well-being or living, right? That it isn't solely a physical thing, it isn't solely a social thing, but there are many of these different dimensions built into our experiences. They all in some ways include positive states or positive aspects and don't only focus on negatives. And they all can be kind of pulled together and used in different ways. So what I want to do now is shift gears and talk a little bit about leisure and how leisure can be related to this idea of health. So leisure can be many things. Leisure is the things that we do in our time when we're free from our other obligations. So while we might think of leisure as things that we do that are kind of planned and purposeful, so things like exercising at the gym or working out or taking a class to learn a new skill, we need to think about leisure very broadly as that things that we do outside of obligations. So things like reading a book or engaging in creative activities like music or art or just going and chilling in the lake or hanging out in a hot tub. Those are all leisure things that we do that have implications for our health. And importantly, leisure activities aren't always exclusively positive for our health. So many leisure activities, things like smoking or engaging in other substances or drinking excessively. These are leisure time activities that can have detrimental effects to our health, but it can also have positive ones as well. So when we think about this health-leisure relationship, it's really a complex set of many relationships that isn't an easy thing to delineate or talk about. And if we want to really understand this well, we need to be having interdisciplinary conversation. So bringing in diverse perspectives, considering diverse outcomes, and considering how the different contexts in which activities are engaged in can have different impacts on our health. So this is why we need some of these kind of difficult, complex, and overlapping concepts. So if we look broadly at the leisure literature, we can identify some big kind of broad trends. And Caldwell has laid this out really nicely, taking a kind of sweeping review of the leisure literature and how it relates to health or well-being. And there's three kind of broad categories that this fits into, and this is prevention, coping, and transcending. So while this literature talked about many different activities, many different kind of dimensions of health, many different demographics or groups of people, we can kind of look broadly at the way that leisure can be a way of preventing negative outcomes or preventing decline, of coping with change as things are happening, and of transcending negative experiences. So, of actually removing oneself from those negative experiences and experiencing something different. And the literature relies on a few different processes of doing this. So, one is building resiliency. So, resiliency being overcoming adversity and emerging stronger or more experienced on the other end. Of developing self determination. So, feeling good about our choices and feeling like we are able to choose what we would like to do and feeling good about those choices that we make and the activities that we engage in. Feeling confident and competent. So, feeling that sense of accomplishment with the activities that we do, and also providing continuity. So, when experiencing negative things, because our leisure activities are outside of obligations, often they can remain the same even when negative things are happening or other contexts of our lives are changing. So, big kind of swooping categories there, but important to kind of consider the way these different concepts and ideas can be related and interrelated differently. So, in summary, to bring it all together, we reviewed those three concepts: so health, well-being, and quality of life, or health, wellness, and quality of life. And we talked about their similarities as well as some of their more subtle differences. So those are important things to know moving forward in how we're using these terms, right? So think about those definitions and how we can use them well. And then we kind of briefly took a look at how leisure can be implicated in these concepts. So moving forward, we want to think about how leisure can affect health, wellness, and health-related quality of life, and thoughtfully consider this relationship and how this relationship can be perceived from different perspectives. So I've linked the things that I've referred to here. You can find those online, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or comments about this talk.